The air crackled with tension. Malika clutched her small bag, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The airport bustled around her, a sea of oblivious faces. But she saw only one face in her mind, her mother's. It was a face etched with power, accustomed to obedience. Today that obedience would be broken. Malika had lived her life in the shadow of her mother's influence. Her mother, a woman who had clawed her way to the top of the city's underworld, had decided it was time for Malika to serve a purpose, to solidify their power through an arranged marriage. A gilded cage was still a cage. Malika yearned for freedom, for a life built on her own terms. This escape, this desperate bid for autonomy, had been planned for weeks. Every detail, every possible contingency had been meticulously crafted. Yet under the weight of her mother's looming presence, even the most meticulous plans felt like flimsy shields against a hurricane. She moved through the terminal, each step a victory against the suffocating expectations that had been thrust upon her since birth. Her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the chaos of her thoughts. This was it. There was no turning back.
Panic swelled in Malika's chest, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. As she spotted a group of men in dark suits, their eyes scanning the crowd with a predatory intensity. Her mother's men. They moved with a practiced ease that spoke of years spent enforcing her will, their presence a dark cloud over her freedom. Fear threatened to consume her, but she clung to the last vestiges of her resolve, knowing that giving in would mean the end of her dreams. She had to disappear, to vanish into the sea of faces around her. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out, for an escape from the tightening net that seemed to close in with every passing second. And then she saw him. He was tall, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed to chase away the shadows that clung to her, offering a glimmer of hope in her darkest moment. He was arguing with the airline staff, his voice a low rumble that carried a sense of authority and calm. A plan, reckless and impulsive, began to form in her mind, driven by desperation and the need to escape. Without a second thought, Malika lunged towards him, grabbing his arm and pressing herself against his side, her heart racing with the audacity of her actions. He stiffened in surprise, his eyes widening as he looked down at her, confusion and concern mingling in his gaze. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling with feigned distress, "don't leave me, not with them here." Her eyes pleaded with him, hoping he would understand the unspoken danger. She let a tear roll down her cheek, hoping she looked the part of a damsel in distress, her vulnerability a stark contrast to the chaos around them. The man hesitated for a beat, his gaze flickering from her face to the men who were now approaching with alarming speed, their intent clear and menacing. Then, to her immense relief, he wrapped his arm around her, his touch a lifeline in the storm of her fear. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice a calming presence in the storm of her fear. "I've got you." His words were a promise, a shield against the darkness that threatened to engulf her. They moved through the airport as one, his arm a protective barrier against the chaos that swirled around them. The bustling crowd seemed oblivious to the tension that crackled between them. Each step they took together a silent promise of solidarity. Malika clung to him, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder of the precarious situation they were in. She could feel the heat of his gaze on her, curious and questioning. His eyes searched hers, seeking answers to questions he hadn't yet voiced. "Who were those guys?" he asked, his voice low, laced with concern. The urgency in his tone was unmistakable, and it made her stomach churn. Malika hesitated, knowing that the lie she was about to spin would determine the course of their interaction. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the deception. "My family," she said, her voice catching in her throat. The words felt heavy on her tongue, each syllable a weight she had to bear. They don't want me to be with you." Her voice wavered, the lie slipping out more easily than she had anticipated. He frowned, his grip tightening on her hand. The intensity of his reaction took her by surprise, and she felt a pang of guilt. "With me, but I don't even know your name." His confusion was palpable, and it made her heart ache. "It's Malika," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And yours?" She needed to know more about him to make the lie more convincing. "Rory," he replied, his eyes searching hers. There was a sincerity in his gaze that made her chest tighten. "Malika," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. "It's a beautiful name." His compliment was genuine, and it made her smile despite the tension. "But why are your parents so against me?" His question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their situation. Malika knew she had to give him more, something to solidify their charade and buy them more time. She took a deep breath, preparing herself for the next lie. "They wanted me to marry someone else," she confessed, her voice filled with a convincing tremor. "Someone powerful." The lie felt like a betrayal, but it was necessary. "They think you're not good enough for me." The words stung, even though they were fabricated. Rory's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with a protectiveness that surprised her. She hadn't expected him to react so strongly. He pulled her closer, his arm a reassuring weight around her waist. The gesture was comforting, and it made her feel safer. "Well," he said, a defiant glint in his eyes, "they're wrong." His words were a promise, a vow to stand by her no matter what. The adrenaline that had fueled Malika's escape began to wane, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She had been running on pure instinct, her body driven by the need to survive, but now, in the relative safety of the airport, the reality of her situation began to sink in. The airport, with its bright lights and endless stream of people, blurred at the edges of her vision. The cacophony of announcements, conversations, and footsteps melded into a distant hum, almost like a surreal dream. Rory, sensing her fatigue, steered her towards a small cafe, his hand never leaving hers. His touch was a lifeline, grounding her in the present moment, reminding her that she wasn't alone. They found a secluded corner, the aroma of coffee and pastries a comforting contrast to the sterile air of the terminal. The warm, inviting scent seemed to wrap around her, offering a brief respite from the chaos outside. Malika sank into the chair, feeling the tension drain from her muscles. It was as if the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders, if only for a moment. She looked at Rory, really looked at him for the first time. In the rush of events, she hadn't had the chance to truly see the man who had come to her aid. His face, etched with concern, held a rugged handsomeness. There was a strength in his features, a quiet determination that spoke volumes about his character. His eyes, warm and intelligent, spoke of a kindness that seemed at odds with the dangerous situation they were in. They were eyes that had seen much, yet still held a spark of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "For everything." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of her gratitude. "You don't have to thank me," he replied, his gaze soft. His words were gentle yet firm, as if he truly believed that helping her was the only option. "I couldn't just leave you there with those thugs." His voice carried a conviction that left no room for doubt. A sudden commotion near the entrance of the cafe shattered the fragile peace. The tranquility they had found was abruptly replaced by chaos. A group of children, their laughter echoing through the cafe, were running amok, their parents struggling to control them. The scene was a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the air just moments before. One little girl, her eyes wide with excitement, broke free from her mother's grasp and ran straight towards a waiter carrying a tray laden with steaming cups of coffee. The impending disaster seemed to unfold in slow motion. Without a moment's hesitation, Rory was on his feet. His reaction was instinctive, a testament to his quick thinking and agility. He moved with a speed and agility that belied his size, scooping up the little girl just as the waiter lost his balance, sending the tray flying through the air. The scene was chaotic, yet Rory's actions were precise and controlled. The cafe erupted in a chorus of gasps and screams, but Rory remained calm, a reassuring presence in the midst of the chaos. His composure was a beacon of stability. He gently placed the girl back on her feet, his smile warm and reassuring. The little girl's fear melted away under his kind gaze. The girl's mother, her face pale with fright, rushed to her side, showering Rory with tearful thanks. Her gratitude was palpable, a mix of relief and admiration. Malika watched him, her heart filled with a newfound admiration. She saw him in a new light, not just as her savior, but as a man of incredible character. He was more than just a kind stranger. He was someone who acted with courage and compassion, even in the face of danger. He was a good man, a hero in the truest sense of the word. As the situation intensifies, the stakes have never been higher. Every decision now carries weight, and the consequences could be monumental. Our characters find themselves at a crossroads where every choice could change the course of their journey. What will they do? How will they navigate these uncharted waters? The tension is palpable and the clock is ticking. Sometimes the ones we trust the most are the ones who deceive us. In this pivotal moment, the truth about the mother's intentions comes to light, unraveling a web of lies that had been carefully spun for years. It's a revelation that shakes the very foundation of trust, leaving us to question everything we thought we knew. Faced with a crossroads, the ultimate choice must be made. This decision is not just about right or wrong, but about the future itself. It's a moment of profound introspection, where every possible outcome is weighed, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The path chosen here will define the course of destiny. Freedom is not just a state of being, but a state of mind. As the chains of the past are broken, a new sense of liberation is embraced. It's a journey towards self-discovery, where the true essence of freedom is realized. This is a moment of empowerment, where the spirit soars and the heart finds peace. With the rise of a new dawn, hope is rekindled and a fresh chapter begins. This is a time of renewal, where the lessons of the past pave the way for a brighter future. It's a celebration of resilience and the unyielding human spirit. As the sun rises, so does the promise of new possibilities and endless opportunities.